Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for coming. This is Writers and Books Visiting Writers Series. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We do readings and creative writing workshops for people of all ages. Currently, all of our programming is online. My name is Dan Hurd, and I'm the Director of Adult Programs. We're so happy to have Minda Harts here tonight for the paperback release of her book, The Memo, What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. It's available now at our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the link in the chat so you can find it. Minda will be in conversation with Stephanie Paredes. She is the Assistant Director of Multicultural Programs in the Division for Diversity and Inclusion at RIT. Minda Harts is the CEO of The Memo, LLC, a career development platform for women of color, and an assistant professor at NYU Wagner. She has been featured on MSNBC's Morning Joe and in Fast Company, The Guardian, and Time Magazine, and hosts a weekly podcast, Secure the Seat. If you'd like to submit a question, you can use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Minda and Stephanie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Dan. Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. I am thoroughly overwhelmed, excited to be here with Minda Harts with this incredible book that I am just so excited about. So welcome, Minda. Excited to have you here with us. So Minda, I have so many places to start, but where I'd love to start and what I feel like people want to be connected with you, right? Because we're going to get into the book in just a little bit, but let's start with the Minda before everyone knew Minda. So why don't you start? We're gonna start by getting to know you a little bit. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where did you grow up? What was your family dynamics like? Tell us a little bit about Minda.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Stephanie. So excited to be in conversation with you and with everybody here today. So we're just gonna go there. We're gonna little Minda, right?
little baby Minda. What was baby Minda doing?
Well, I grew up in Southern California and in Illinois, and I am one of 3 kids. And so very humble beginnings, the first person in my family to graduate from college and to enter into corporate America. And so, you know, the first to do a lot of different things, but it's just been, and then I've lived in a lot of different places for work. My prior life allowed me to live in a lot of states that I never thought I would live in, but the one that I love the most is New York.
I would hope so. No. Great. One of 3 kids now. Are you the only daughter? Do you have brothers, sisters? What's the breakdown there? Because we know family dynamic always impacts us if we're like the only girl in the midst of everything or one of 3 girls. So tell us a little bit about your family.
Yep. So family of 5, and I am the oldest of the 3 kids and the only girl.
Me too. I'm a middle child and the only girl. It's a whole different set of dynamics when you're kind of like in that middle ground. So you mentioned living in a lot of different places that, you know, excited you, and I'm pretty sure you've learned so many different lessons depending on where you were. Now, with all that growing up you were doing, the people that you were surrounded by, who were those women that surrounded you and that you looked up to and kind of gave you that guidance growing up?
Yeah, you know, the women who raised me, definitely my mother, you know, she instilled like the love and faith, which is really important. I think, especially at a time like currently in our country, just we need a lot of love. We need a lot of faith to keep going each and every day. Also, my grandmother, I spent a lot of time, I was one of those kids that was, you know, always at their grandma's house. And so.
There's no rules at grandma's house, so, you know, we love to be at grandma's house.
Yeah. You know, so I have very fond memories of just, you know, being with her and, you know, back then shopping at, you know, as she called it, pennies, you know, JC Penney's, and, you know, just listening to her stories about, you know, moving from Louisiana to Los Angeles during the Great Migration. And so I have a lot of history embedded in our family. And then also I had the privilege of getting to know my great grandmother
Oh, wow.
Yeah, before she passed away. So I definitely, lean on the strong women. And my mother, she's one of 5 girls. And so I spent a lot of time around my aunt. So, I've always been very much a part of women's circles, very much part of, who I am in the fabric of Minda.
That's amazing. Wow. It definitely is a privilege to be able to talk to your great-grandmother and kind of share those experiences. And there's so much history there that you can just soak up. And you talked a little bit about, the importance of faith. Tell me a little bit about how do you carry that with you every day to keep you strong, especially in these very difficult times we're in right now. A lot of people lean on their faith and lean on their, their protective circle of friends and family. Tell us a little bit about how does that faith ground you?
Yeah, faith grounds me a lot because especially right now, a lot of us might feel, defeated or hopeless or worried, all of the emotions depending on what time of the day or hour of the day it is for you. And the one thing that I have to anchor myself in is that having the faith that there's more people who want to make this country work for everybody, right? And it's just like the workplace. I believe that there are people who want to make the workplace better than we found it. And so I have to lean into that because that's the only thing that it's going to keep me going, right? If I lose that faith, then it's going to be hard getting up in the morning. It's going to be hard being optimistic. And so, I challenge myself to find those pockets of faith, find those pockets of hope, because we need them even more so now, anchoring ourselves in something, right?
Absolutely. No, I 100% agree with you on that. It's something you have to carry with you, that hope, that faith, that energy, and that courage, to just keep on keeping on, as they say. Now, as you transition from state to state and the lessons you're learning, here you land with your academic career, starting out. Tell me a little bit about your academic career and maybe how many times did you shift your focus? Because as we're, going through our academic career, we think, I want to be this, I want to be that, and then try a little bit of everything. Tell us about your journey in your academic career. Did you always want to be an author?
No, I actually kind of laugh about, the people ask, how did you get here? And I'm like, I don't know. But it was one of those things where I had mentioned that I spent, time in corporate America and nonprofit. So that was 15 years of my career. And so
Wow.
and then in the last couple of years, just started doing more of the teaching and practitioner work around the work that I do. But for me, I always thought that I aspired to have my seat at the table, right? I wanted to be in the executive suite. That was the thing that I always had my heart and mind set on being or striving for. I would see those, the few shows with people of color who were in, professional roles, who were like, the lawyer or the, the doctor or something like that. And so I thought, what, I want to have influence. I want to have a seat at the table, just like, Shirley Chisholm spoke about. And so, bringing that seat. And so for me, once I did have certain seats at the table, I was always the only one. And I realized that it's very isolating being the only one. And there's a lot, I know we'll talk about it, but sometimes when you're the only Black woman in the room, you learn how to silence yourself, right? You settle into microaggressions, you settle into bias, some of those things that people would say, oh, they don't mean any harm, but at some point it starts to mean harm to us, right? And so for me, I came upon my career of thinking, oh, this is great, but what can I do to make the workplace better than I found it, right? So how do I create more seats? How do I get information out to women who look like me to say, I know that some of these rooms aren't thinking about us, right? They're not invested in our success. And that's when I started to redefine what success looked like for me, because I had a thought I knew what success was, but actually success was making sure that not only I have my seat, but that others have their seats as well. And so that's how I started this kind of equity journey to creating a company, The Memo, which came first before the book. And through just digging in that faith and hope, then eventually I realized that I couldn't stop there, and that courage that you spoke of.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned Shirley Chisholm, because I love that quote, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. you know, and it's like, we always got to carry a folding chair everywhere we go because we never know when that opportunity may arise or when we're just going to have to go in there and sit ourselves down.
Right.
So when you, which is, you know, I mean, Shirley Chisholm is, I would have loved to have met her and begged her to be my mentor. Because mentorship is such an important piece of career development and leadership, especially as women of color, looking to, you know, other women of color as well to kind of just say, listen, we're connected here. We already know our experiences are very unique. How can we, you know, raise each other up? Talk to me a little bit about those mentors in your life that have just been like, Minda, come on, girl. You know, that tough love mentors, the mentors, you know, talk to me a little bit about the different mentors that have impacted your life.
Yeah, you know, mentorship is interesting. I talk about it in the memo. I have a whole chapter about mentorship and sponsorship because I think it's so important. I think I read a statistic last year that said women of color are over-mentored, and under-sponsored, right? We typically have access to mentors, even if they may look like us or may not look like us, but we don't always have the sponsorship or the person in the room to speak our name when we're not there, right? Or who's actually invested in our success. And I think both are very important on our road to career development. And for me, when I was in my former life, I worked as the only one. So I would have loved to see other Black women or women of color who could have mentored me, but I just did not have, they weren't in my industry, right? They weren't in my office. And so I had to start to look for mentors in other people, right? And my mentors, they were two white men, Chuck and Steve, you know, and Chuck and Steve, they invested in my success. And it probably would have taken me, you know, 10x years to, you know, get the pay that I wanted, get the influence that I wanted, had they not vouched for me. And a lot of that required relationship building, right? And I think sometimes, I know now we're not in our cubes or in our office, you know, before I would say, we got to get out of our cubes, right? We have to go to the happy hour,
right.
the break room birthday parties. But now we have to, you know, show up on Zoom, you know, when the companies are doing their virtual book clubs or their, you know, virtual happy hours. I mean, these are the opportunities that people get a chance to get to know us, but also we get to know who would be good mentors, right? Who could potentially be a sponsor. And so I think relationship building is so key to anything, whether you're an entrepreneur or, you know, an author, or you're, you know, in a traditional 9-to-5. It's really important that you have a squad of people who are invested in your success, and that likewise, you know, vice versa.
Absolutely. And that also holds you accountable and continue to encourage you and push you, even on the days, because I know you've had days, like we all have days where it's like, I don't know if I could make it today. I don't know if today, I don't know what tomorrow's looking like, but right now it's not feeling good. So that, you know, that community, you know, when they say it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village for all of us to kind of just make it sometimes. So, you know, let's get into the meat. Let's get into the book. And I want to start with this incredible quote because it's just so impactful. And you said this. Women of color are often left out of conversation on salary and professional access. The memo came to life because we all have something to give. And together we can break the glass ceiling. Never be afraid to invest in yourself. That last sentence for women of color, that's so hard for us to do for so many times, especially in the professional field. Never being afraid to invest in yourself. And so when we're looking at salary negotiation, we're looking at equity, we're looking at access, so many things that we don't have access to or don't know how to access those things. Talk to me a little bit about when you were writing the memo. Tell me about the moment you're like, you know, I need to really get this going as a book to inspire and impact other women. Talk to me a little bit about how did you get to the memo where I'm writing a book and we're doing this?
Yeah, that's a great question, Stephanie. And the best way I could say is I was in my former career, right? And I was under, was working in a really toxic work environment. And as I mentioned before, I had always been the only one. So I was kind of used to the blatant, or I was used to subtle racism. I wasn't used to blatant racism, right?
Right.
And it started, I took a new job and I started to experience blatant racism in the workplace. And to the point where it was so debilitating because I would start to get panic attacks. I was suffering from depression. There were moments where I was being called the black girl inside of meetings. There were, you know, just, it was a lot of things. And I have to tell the story because, you know, I had a colleague, it was one particular colleague, her name in the book is Carrie. And she was, at first I kept trying to say, you know what, this can't be racism, you know, because we want everything not to point to that. Right? Like
right, because we're like, don't pull the race card, Minda.
Yes,
you know,
yes.
we're always like, well, I don't want to pull the race card, but it is the race card.
And at the time I kept telling myself, it's not racism, right? No, she can't possibly be. This is 2014. What are we doing here? You know, and I kept trying to tell myself that the things that she was doing were, I'll just work harder, right? I'll just, you know, try to lean into being more collaborative. I'll try to do all the things, but we can do all the things and still racism.
It's still not enough.
Right. And so
it's still not enough.
It got so bad that I ended up having to go to my boss's boss to have a conversation. And I also want to say that I didn't go to HR because the person who was oppressing me at work was friends with the HR person. And then, you know, so there's that. And then I went to my boss's boss to have a conversation, and I'll never forget. And she also was friends with the person. And she said to me, you know, I know these things are going on. She agreed that these things were happening, but she said that we hired you because we thought you had thick skin. And Carrie's not going anywhere, but you're doing a really great job, and you need to decide if you want to be here or not. And in that moment, I was already pretty fragile, right? I had gone through all of this. You have to read the book to find out all the things that I was dealing with when I finally got to that point. And which I also want to say, self-advocacy is so important. I finally had to say what was real, right? My truth. And I remember walking out to my car, and when I got into the car, I broke out in tears. I was just so frustrated. I'd worked so hard to get this seat. And what we know to be true is that racism doesn't just kill people, but it kills careers too. And I was, you know, in a deep like cry inside of the car. And I remember turning on the radio, and Whitney Houston's song, Where Do Broken Hearts Go, comes on the radio.
Oh, goodness. Great timing, Whitney.
Yes. And I said, where do the broken hearts go of women of color when we can't take it anymore? And in that moment, Stephanie, is when I didn't know what it would look like. I didn't know it'd be a book. I didn't know it'd be a company. In that moment, I said, I have to do something. I have to do something. What is my advocacy going to be in the workplace? And that was the impetus for creating and thinking about resources and tools that focus and center the experiences of women of color in the workplace. And as I started to build out and lean into those things, then that was the impetus for creating the memo.
And it's so, you know, you say something so impactful. Racism kills careers, and it kills so many things. And one of the things that it kills spirits. It kills your spirit, because as women of color, we're in the workplace and we're trying to be, you know, we have, you know, the superwoman complex. We got to be strong. We got to be fierce. We got to be smart. We got to do it, you know, twice as good as the next person, maybe even 3 times as better as the next person. And we carry that every single day in every single project and every single moment. But when something like that happens, where it hits your inner core, where do we go from there? And I think that when we take a moment to say, is this worth it at the end of the day? And we really have to start questioning ourselves. Okay, that's where self-advocacy, exactly what you say, comes into play, which is so important. So, you know, the book is called What Women of Color Need to Know to Secure a Seat at the Table. And I think this is a crazy question, but someone may be asking this out there, who knows? Why do we need a seat at the table? I know the answer, but you know, we just want to make sure that it's so important when we're at any table, reflecting on who is represented at the table, who is not represented at the table. As women of color, why do we need to have a seat at the table?
Yeah, you know, I'll give you a really great example in real time. Recently, there was a CEO of a very famous bank that many of you probably use. And he, just a couple days ago, he said that we can't find any Black talent. There's a shortage. And when people like that say things, that's why we need to be at the table, right? Because if you have people that only, the dominant majority is only at the table making decisions for everybody, the narrative in their minds is, we don't know where they're at. We don't know where to find them, because clearly they're not looking for them, right? You know, and so, I mean, Black women in particular are one of the most educated groups in our country right now. And to say that there's no, we have a pipeline issue and we don't know where to find them, that means you don't know, you're not looking for us, right? And so that's why it's important to have people at the table to inform people, to give, to offer those perspectives. You know, have you ever recruited at a historically Black university or college? You know, are you working with headhunters or firms who have focus on diverse talent? You know, so if you're not doing that, or you're only going to the Ivy Leagues, or you're only going here, then yeah, you may not find the pool you're looking for, and it's being intentional. So I think, you know, representation matters to those who never get to see themselves at the table. And we can't say that diversity and inclusion, equity, belonging matter, and the room just look the same, right? So you really need, like, even right now, in our racially sensitive climate, how are we going to solve some of the systemic issues inside the workplace? You need women of color at the table having those conversations, building out a plan, right? Dismantling systems. The same people who built the system can't be the ones to fix the system by themselves.
Exactly, because you made the rules.
Yeah.
We're not going to change the rules. And so one of the things that you just mentioned, which is so important, is dismantling this system and having the right people at the table. And so as you reflect at, boards, what they look like, even smaller committees, if the diversity of your community is not represented at the table when those decisions are being made, you're kind of missing the whole boat here, people. Yep. Right? And so when we focus on, let's talk a little bit about, because I think recruitment, a lot of people forget that part of it, because they are so comfortable consistently going to the same kinds of places looking for the different kind of people. When you reflect on the book and having a seat at the table, especially when, talk to the women of color, how can we find those access? How can we start to build those networks of opportunity for us to say, hey, I don't mind sitting at the table. I just need an invitation. How can we do that?
Yep. Well, the one thing that I will say is that I wrote the memo as a love letter to women of color in the workplace, because we've worked too hard to lean out now. But I also wrote the memo for our managers, for our colleagues, so they can also understand what it's like to be us in many ways, right? I couldn't represent every woman of color or Black woman in the book, but there are certain themes that resonate with us in our experiences. And so even like right now, understanding that if you have Black talent or brown talent inside of your company, maybe today, after a Breonna Taylor situation has occurred, you don't do a one-on-one today, right? You don't do your evaluation. Maybe you wait till next week, like having that emotional intelligence. And then, I think those are the important things of why we as women of color have to set boundaries, right? Or like, for example, many companies are making commitments and platitudes to Black employees, right? They're saying externally that Black lives matter, but they have to matter internally too, right? So this is an opportunity, I think, for women of color to say, you know what, you've actually made this commitment. This is important to you. And actually, I'd like to be part of this, right? I want to serve
exactly.
this committee. So we can also create seats for ourselves during this time period, because our companies are looking for us for the answers, right? And I think that now is a really great time for women of color in the workplace, because people want us, right? And I think when we talk about a pipeline issue, I think the main issue too is that we're not retaining and advancing the talent that you have, right? So you don't always have to go out looking, but are you cultivating the Black and brown women that are right inside of your company? They can secure a seat, right? But we have to be invested in their success.
Absolutely. I cannot agree with that more. I think it's just so important. Like you say, a lot of companies are saying, yes, Black Lives Matter, our workers matter as the outside, but inside, what are we doing? Are we changing the culture inside? Because if we're not changing the climate of our environments that we work in. How do we expect to change boardrooms, classrooms, community centers? Everything starts from a systems approach so that we can start to impact change, the ripple effect. Yep. That is just so important. Now, I do have one more question before we get into some of the Q&A from the audience. What has been the most unexpected thing that you have received once the book came out? The unexpected feedback from people. Has anything surprised you?
That's a great question. For me, because I had spent so much of my career in isolation, suffering in silence, I didn't realize that my story was other people's stories, right? And I think I was surprised to find out that, I no longer say this is my first book. I say it's our first book, because so many of the stories that I told and shared about my experiences in the workplace, I heard from so many women, whether they were 65, 25, 45, we have cried some of the same workplace tears, right? We've experienced some of the same workplace trauma, and we've, celebrated over some of the same workplace wins. And so for me, I just didn't realize how much we really, truly needed this book, because there aren't many books like it. And so I think it opens up the door to tell other stories. And so for me, again, knowing that, to be seen for the first time. And I wanted that. I wanted women of color to be able to see themselves in the career narrative. So I guess I was surprised that they actually did, because that's what I wanted. But sometimes when you're telling your story and you're being vulnerable, you don't realize how healing that can be to you and to others.
And I'll be honest with you, Minda, and thank you for saying that, because just from the title itself, like you said, there's not many books like this written. And I think that the vulnerability that you had to even write the book and to be honest and to stand in your truth, that takes a lot of courage to do, because you're putting so much of yourself out there. And the fact that as a woman of color myself, I'm looking for some sort of camaraderie and guidance and sisterhood. It's like, I know it ain't just me going through this stuff over here. You have your colleagues and things like that, and other women you connect to, but it's just so difficult sometimes, because it's only you and the people that you know. And you're like, is this experience happening in other places with other people in different ways? And so being an author, I know, is such a vulnerable spot to be, because when you share those personal stories, you're building these connections. And I love what you said. It's a healing process. As we know, healing is it's an everyday journey. It's not a place we actually get to, but it's a journey that we start to experience a little bit differently every day. So I just want to, thank you for the courage to write the book, and more so the courage to be vulnerable, because for us as Black women and women of color, sometimes we're not allowed to be vulnerable. And I appreciate that you did that through this book. So thank you for that. So we're gonna get into some questions here that we have.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, let's see here. Oh, this is a good one. Who are some of your heroes, both in literature and the actual world? Do authors like Zora Neale Hurston inspire you?
Yes, of course. I love that question. So for me, I am a really big Audre Lorde fan. And so I really lean into her words, because I feel like she was so ahead of her time when she talked about intersectionality, when she talks about, white women being the center of most experiences, right? Even when we say women in the workplace, that tends to mean white women, and everybody else comes after or is an asterisk. So, Audre Lorde really gave me the courage to be vulnerable, because she shared so much of herself. She was not only an activist, an author, a truth teller, and she inspires my work, even as she's passed to the next life. But one of my favorite quotes of hers is, "Beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it." And I say that to women of color all the time, because sometimes James Baldwin, he talked about the lie. America would allow us to believe this lie, and the lie would tell us that we don't belong in these rooms, that we don't, that we can't have an executive role, or that and that's not true. right? You know, we deserve it. We've worked hard for it. We've got this, you know, we've gone to school, we've gotten certification, we have lived experiences. And so I really want us to lean into our courage and push aside our caution, because everything that's coming to us is we're direct beneficiaries of our ancestors, right? Their courage, their work. So everything that we get, we deserve. And every room that you walk into, you belong, but that room may not deserve to have you in it. And so know that you don't have to accept everything, right? So I have to
say it louder for the people in the back, Minda. Say it louder.
Yeah, so yeah, that's what I tell myself all the time when I'm like struggling. I think of Audre Lorde's words, beware of feeling like you're not good enough to deserve it. And so, you know, let's own it and swim in it, right? You know, we deserve it. So
I love that quote.
Yeah. So
I love that quote so much, because it's, you know, there's another quote out there that's kind of similar, you know, you accept the love you think you deserve, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, we have to be able to stand firm that we do belong in the room and that we have worked for it. Not that we deserve it. It's not a gift. I've worked for this. It's not a handout or a handout. It's
not
Exactly. That ain't a gift. I don't work for this. We have another question here. In the book, you spoke about the need for professional development and having mentors. Can you provide insight on how to go about connecting with a mentor, and should it be a person of color?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking. You know, the one thing before I answer the question, I just want to let everyone know, I know that networking and relationship building may look a little bit different in a virtual environment. And I get that, right? We're no longer in the break rooms. We're no longer, you know, passing our colleagues the way we used to. And so it's going to take us a little more intentionality to really build and foster those relationships. And so I think it's important to have a diverse group of mentors. So yes, if you can find some, you know, women of color or people of color that are doing some of the things that you want to do or in your industry, definitely, you know, seek them out. If they're online, follow them on social media, engage with their content. I think sometimes we tell ourselves that it has to be some formalized mentorship, right? Sometimes it will be that, and over time it may grow into that. But I have mentors in my life where I've never asked formally, will you be my mentor? But
right.
But they're people that I know I can go to for advice, right? And they have a vested interest in something that I'm doing, and I know that they're there to give me guidance, right? And so I think, and then there's people that I don't even know that I follow and I read their books, and I call them mentors in my head, right? I have a lot of mentors in my head where, you know, Oprah is a mentor in my head, right? You know, you know, as a businesswoman, you know, I can look and see some of the things that she's done and, you know, ways she's built her brand. And I could say that she's a mentor. So I think social media allows us to be able to, and reading books and, you know, blogs and podcasts allow us to really build our mentorship. And so, so that's important. So yes, seek people out and, you know, ask them for, and even if you're working with some people in your current company or at another company, right now, most of us are at home, right? So it's okay to ask for that 15-minute virtual coffee. But what I will say is make sure you have an agenda, right? Because people's time is precious, you know, other people's time is precious, and so is yours. So allowing yourself to, you know, think, what is it that I want to ask them? What is the advice that I want, making the most out of that? And then you allow yourself to be able to follow up later, right? So after they've given you that advice, maybe a few months later, you can come back and say, hey, this advice that you gave me, and you're starting to foster and build those relationships. But I also think it's important to have that diversity, you know, so having people who are not the same age as you know, maybe younger, older, different races, genders, orientations. I think it's really important to have just a diverse group of people that you're talking to and that you're getting insight from. And so now is the perfect time to reach out to people. I feel like people are a little more generous with their time right now.
I completely agree with that. And I love the fact that when you talk about mentorship, this idea, and someone mentioned this, fascinating distinction between mentors and sponsors. And I've never even thought about it that way. But that distinction that you made between the two, you have your mentorship and you have your sponsors. Can you dive just a little bit deeper into that? Because I think that One, I've never heard that before, and I'm excited to hear about the distinction of those two. And the attendee as well would love to hear a little bit more about a mentor and a sponsor, and how do we go about approaching one or the other?
Yep, that's great. So for example, let's say I wrote the memo and I say that use me as a mentor, right? So I offer advice. I have a newsletter. I have a podcast. I do LinkedIn Live. So you can use me as a mentor, right? I have a lot of advice out on the internet. So I can be your unofficial mentor, right? So that's great. I've given you advice on how to secure your seat, how to network, but someone who is a sponsor actually is the person who can really catapult your career, right? So I mentioned earlier when I was working in a traditional environment, I had a Steve, or I had a Chuck, right? And so Steve, for example, he was in the executive suite and he was not coming to check and see what was going on with me. So I had to make sure that I was going to some of those happy hours that he was at. I was going to some of those meetings that he would be in. I would make sure that if I seen him in the elevator, I would, strike up small talk, and I would do that for a little while. And every time I'd see him, I drop another gem and I get to know him a little bit more. And eventually, over like a 9-month period, I finally asked, can we have some time together? I'd love to talk to you about some of the things that I'm doing. And as I started to, talk about my career and ask him questions, we built this relationship. And then Steve was able to, when he was in those rooms that had no one that looks like me in it, and they would say, what about this open position? He was there to say, I think we should offer it to Minda. Someone who can really catapult your career in ways that you wouldn't have probably been able to do for yourself. So it's the people who actually are invested in your success and can help you move forward in a tangible way. So those people in the rooms that have influence, right? They're using their privilege to help you along as well, right? And so you can maybe think about some of those people who've even done that for you. And if you don't have those people in your life, finding out and building relationships with those people who have influence in your company, who can speak your name when you're not in the room. When an open position comes up and they say, well, no, Minda only has 5 years experience, and that person can say, no, but she can do the job, so let's try it. Those are the people we need. And that's a sponsor. They're putting their name and their reputation on the line for you because they believe in what you can do.
I love that. I love that. I'm gonna tell everybody the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, because I'm now thoroughly obsessed with this concept. We have another question. How do we show support for each other as Black women while also holding each other accountable?
Yeah, that's a great question. In the book, I definitely talk about how we hold white people accountable for some of the distress and oppression that they've caused inside the workplace. But I think it's equally important to also have those courageous conversations with each other, right? And I think sometimes we, as people of color, or Black women, women of color, we sometimes give each other a pass, right? Like, I'm not going to say anything, but we're upset with that person, or what is that saying? All skin folk ain't kin folk. Like, we can see it. We can see it. But I also think we have to lean into our courage and have conversations with people. How can people know where you stand or what your boundaries are if you don't address it? And again, I know that's part of that self-advocacy. So I think we can go to those people and say, give them the benefit of the doubt, hey sis, I just wanted to let you know, we can be in collaboration together. We don't have to be in competition. There's room for all of us. Think about what we could do together, right? And if you are having that conversation with them, you're giving them the benefit of the doubt. Now, if there's continuous harm that you feel, then that's a different conversation, right? But I think sometimes we don't even allow ourselves to address that elephant in the room with each other, right? And I don't think that we can afford, there's too much trauma that women of color, Black women face in the workplace, and we can't keep oppressing each other either, right? So I think we have to have those hard conversations with each other, because where we're going, we don't need any extra harm, and we don't need any gatekeepers, right? Because those people, if they don't want to be helpful, then as my mom used to say, just go sit down somewhere.
Yes. Go ahead and sit down somewhere, girl. Exactly. It's exactly what you say. And I think it's just so important as we look at our relationships as Black women and women of color, and how do we navigate this space together. And, like you said, we got enough going on. We don't got to do it to each other. And I think addressing that directly with the other woman or the other person, it is so important. And I'll quickly share, you know, that's such a great example. My friend and I, we did not start out the best colleagues at all. There was a lot of harm done for a very long time. And it wasn't until we literally were like, why are you mad at me? Well, why are you mad at me? What did I do to you? What did I do to you? And we started to realize we mad at the same thing and at the same people and at the same system. But we didn't have an outlet, right? And sometimes we inadvertently caused harm to one another. And so after a lot of talking and a lot of conversation and healing and collaboration, we were able to really shift the culture we had, not just within us, but also within the department.
Yep.
So it's so important what you say. Let's not cause more harm. Let's work on our healing first.
Yes.
There's enough harm being done to us. So that is it for the questions. So before we go, we have some fun rapid fire questions to ask you, Minda. So no right or wrong answer to this at all. It's the first thing that comes to mind. Okay. What is your favorite color?
Pink.
What would I find in your refrigerator right now?
Almond milk.
You need to go grocery shopping. No. What is the last book you read?
Begin Again by Eddie Glaude Jr.
If you could trade places with any other person for a week, famous or not, living or dead, real or fictional, with whom would it be?
I think Drake. I would like to trade places with Drake for a little bit and, you know, run through the 6 with my woes, you know.
I love it. What was the last movie you went to see?
Wow. It feels like I don't
Netflix or otherwise?
Okay, yeah. I'm like, I can't remember the last time I was at the movie theater. But I think what was the last movie that I saw? You know what? I don't even, like, what did I see?
I know, right?
I don't remember.
You are so busy, you don't even watch movies.
I do, but, you know, recently we've been, like, on this kick of watching, like, old, like, 80s movies, and I think maybe the last 80s movie I watched was Batteries Not Included. Because
I love that movie. I remember that movie. Oh my goodness.
It's different. It's different when you're older, though. It's like, it was much better when I was like 5. Yeah.
Yes, as adults, 80s movie don't really carry that well. If Hollywood made a movie about your life, whom would you like to see play you?
Oh, that's a great question. I like Zendaya. I like her style.
Yeah. I could see that. Yes.
Yeah.
If you're a type of food, what type of food would you be?
Sushi.
Oh, I love sushi. How would you describe yourself in 3 words?
Resilient. Driven. And compassionate.
I love that. Now that is our last question. And so I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Just remember to everyone on Buy the Memo by Minda Harts. There's hardcover and paperback. Hardcover is available for curbside pickup at 740 University Avenue. So please make sure that you support, read the book, join a book club, recommend this book, get it however you want to get it, online, in person, whatever, and make sure you not only buy one for yourself, but buy one for your friend or your family member or your colleagues. So get out there, read the book, and let's have better conversations about how we as women of color can get our seat at the table and keep the seat, and more importantly, open a seat for somebody else to come to the table as well. So thank you so much again, Minda. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephanie. Round of applause for you. Thank you so much for your moderation, and thank you to Writers and Books for having me, and thank you to all of you. You could have been anywhere, but you're here.
Yes, so thank you all very much. And remember, here's a picture in case you are more of a visual learner. Minda Harts, The Memo. Get it, available for purchase online and in stores today. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, everyone. And don't remember, Writers and Books is your place to get your books. Have a good night, everybody. Hi, Dan.
Hey, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I didn't know if I was supposed to leave or come back. I signed off. I'm like, wait, I didn't.
No, that was perfect. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
That was really wonderful.
She's absolutely stunning and lovely and wonderful and
Yeah.
so dreamy. I cannot wait. I just can't wait for this one. I'm excited. Thank you again. And if there's anything else you need, shoot me an email.
Yeah, thank you. We'll be in touch, and yeah, this was really wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dan. Have a good night.
Yeah, you too.
Bye-bye.